Hello and welcome to Lady Di's Book Club. I have been sick, so I didn't do any videos recently, for a couple weeks actually, but luckily I read enough that I had some already stored. In case you can tell, sometimes I say a date like it's the middle of March when actually I don't post it till April. So I've had to stop doing that. That was a little bit ridiculous. And you can still hear my voice is not quite on top of it, but you know what? The show must go on no matter what. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. This week, I am reviewing a book that I picked up because I liked the title, Dig Me a Grave, but didn't realize it was a nonfiction book. And guess what? It was a nonfiction book, right? So it's a 2026 or 2025, I can't remember which. It's a brand new book, though, out by Dick Harpootlian, who happens to be a prosecuting attorney, or at least he was a prosecuting attorney. And he has written this book, Dig Me a Grave, the inside story of the serial killer who seduced the South. So I read a book about prosecuting a serial killer, and I enjoyed it. Actually, this serial killer is Pee Wee Gaskins. I had never heard of him, from South Carolina. He is the most prolific serial killer in the South, I guess, in South Carolina specifically. And it was interesting to look into kind of the life of Pee Wee Gaskins, and his killings were weird. He used people right up until he just flipped a switch and couldn't get any more use out of them, or they did something that he thought was sketchy or whatever. But he was a nice guy in the community, supposedly, even though he ran several shady criminal things like theft and card stealing and I don't know, whatever. But anyway, shady guy, liked his young girls, but he killed other people besides the young girls. And the lengths that this prosecutor went through to finally put him on death row and make sure he was executed is just phenomenal. And the toll it took on this guy. It's a really interesting read. It's really good. And I probably am not saying his last name right, but Dick Harpootlian, Dig Me a Grave. Very good book. Whether you're into serial killers or not, it's not real graphic, but it kind of gives you a look into what the mind of the serial killer, the minds of the people in the community, the minds of the prosecutors and the defense, as they go through these hoops with these people. It just kind of gives you a look into that. And some of this kind of hit home for me. I grew up in the era of Ted Bundy, to tell you the truth. And my father always, young, long legs, long hair. I was the style of person that Ted Bundy went for. Always was giving me self-defense tips. Always was grabbing me and say, what do you do to get out of this? Always was telling me to be on my toes, to be aware, and to this day I still am. And mostly that was because there was a girl found raped and murdered up at Miller-Sylvania State Park back in the 70s. And I'd have only been 10 years old, but I was tall for my age. I would have passed easily for 13 or 14. And that was the age group that Ted Bundy was for 13, 14 and up. And they thought Ted Bundy had done it. Well, Ted Bundy never ever said that he did that one. Okay, he was in our area, but he never copped to that one. And authorities in the early 2000s are now thinking that another guy that lived as a crow flies a quarter of a mile away from me in the same neighborhood. In fact, my brother and I, we would go across the vacant lot and go over to the ballpark, and this guy lived right down from the ballpark. I mean 3-4 houses down, because we go to the ballpark, cut across to get over to the lake, da 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 da. But anyway, William Cosden was his name. He did his first murder in the 60s and got away with it, got to a mental institute and then got released, came up to Washington State, where I'm from, and actually he murdered somebody that they didn't track down and left him in Capitol Forest. They didn't track down until his DNA was proven in the early 2000s. So he actually got sentenced to death for that one. But he was in prison already for a rape and brutal beating of another girl that he had picked up at the truck stop that he worked at, that we lived 5 miles from, maybe less, right? And he had dragged her out and raped her and beat her, but she got away. Otherwise, she'd have been killed. They really think that Brenda Baker at Miller-Sylvania State Park actually was killed by Cosden, but Cosden never did admit to it. Bundy didn't admit to it. Cosden didn't admit to it. So my father was training me for Ted Bundy, but little did he know that the guy to worry about was actually in our neighborhood. This only came to light in the early 2000s. So the guy was actually in our neighborhood. I probably trick-or-treated at their house. I probably sold campfire mints at their house. You know, I know my brother and I were back and forth all over the place, you know, on bikes and walking and stuff, you know, by there probably millions of times, visiting friends. I hung out at the ballpark once in a while, depending on who we were hanging with, you know, things like that. So you never know. You never know who's in your neighborhood. It's very interesting. And this book kind of brought all that back up, and it made me think, you know, I grew up in the Ted Bundy era, and there was this Miller-Sylvania Park, which I'd been to Miller-Sylvania Park millions of times, you know, hiked around there, camped around there, swam around there, family picnics there, things like that. And to find out that, oh, it probably wasn't Ted Bundy, but even worse, it was a guy that was no more than a quarter of a mile away from the house, probably less than that. His house, as a crow flies, like I said, was probably less than 1/10 of a mile. To find out that that was actually going on, you know, you just never know. You never know about people. Does that mean be scared? No. But it is interesting to look into the mind of people like that, because you never know. You just never know who it might be. I mean, how many times do we say, well, he was such a nice, polite guy, about Bundy, about Dahmer, about all of them. People love them. Pee Wee Gaskin, people loved him. So interesting. Anyway, that is a little aside into my upbringing and my life, as well as a book review. So I hope you're reading nonfiction or fiction, either one, whatever floats your boat. Have a great day. This is Lady Di with Lady Di's Book Club signing off. Have a great day and keep reading.